HTML forms. An HTML form is used to collect user input. The user input is most often set to a server for processing. And this is an example. This is how it should look like. So we're gonna click and try it yourself, and this is the code that they're giving us, and this is how it should look like. So when we click submit, they should go to a server. If you click submit button, the form data will be sent to a page called action_page.php. So if we click it, submit form data, your input was received. The server has processed your input and returned the answer. This tutorial will not teach you how servers are processing input. Processing input is explained in the PHP tutorial. So this is just a general overview. We're not gonna be dealing with servers here. So let's just grab this example real quick, and let's go to Visual Studio Code, and let's create a file named index.html. Okay, so it's gonna be index.html, and now we're gonna paste it and save it. So we can open it with you go here, your index.html file, right click and open with live server, and this is how it should look like. So we have HTML forms, first name, you can I don't know, change it to, I don't know, Johnny or whatever. If you click the submit button, the form data will be sent to a page called action_page.php. So let's click submit and let's see what happens. Can I get action_page.php because we don't have it? Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to the Visual Studio Code. Okay, so here we have okay, so we have to create a new file. So you're gonna create a new file and you're gonna name it action_page.php. So we don't have anything on the file, but we have the file itself. So let's try it again. I'm gonna click submit. Okay, and it downloaded this file, so it's working. But here we're not gonna be dealing with servers, so it's gonna be fine. Okay, so we're gonna go through the code, and here we have in line 7 we are using the form element. The form element represents a collection of form associated elements, some of which can represent editable values that can be submitted to a server for processing. So we have the action attribute, the URI of a program that processes the form information. This value can be overridden by a form action attribute on a button or input element. We have the equal sign, we have the double quotes. Inside of the double quotes we have the slash, and then the file that we want to send the information. In this case is action_page.php. so this is just for this example. We don't have anything in that file, but that is that. Inside of the form element we're gonna have the label element, and we're gonna have also the form attribute, and you can read all this information if you want. The ID of a label form related element in the same document as the label element. The first element in the document with an ID matching the value of the for attribute is the label able control for this label element. If it is a label able element, if it is not label able, then the for attribute has no effect. If there are other elements which also match the ID value later in the document, they are not considered. Note, a label element can have both a for attribute and a contain control element as long as the for attribute points to the contain control element. So in this case they're using the for equal sign. Inside of the double quotes we're gonna have the F name, that is gonna be stand for the first name. We're gonna close the angle brackets, we're gonna type in first name colon, and then we're gonna end the label tag, and we're gonna use a BR that is for the line break. The BR element represents a line break. So if we go to our website, we have a break line here, so that is the way it looks clean and neat. If I delete the BR, for example, and if I go to the website, it's gonna look messy. It's gonna look like this. So that is the reason we have the BR there. So now we have the input element. We're gonna have the type attribute equal sign. Inside of the double quotes, we're gonna have text. So this type is gonna be type text. We're gonna have an ID equal sign double quotes. The ID has to match the 4, so it's gonna be F name. Then we're gonna have the name equal sign double quotes is gonna be again F name. We're gonna have a value equal sign double quotes, and in this case they're using John. So in lines 10 we're gonna have again another label. We have the label element. We have the for attribute equal sign. Inside of the double quotes we're gonna have this time L name, that is gonna stand for last name. We close the angle brackets. The context is gonna be last name colon. We end the label tag. We're also gonna have another line break, and to the next line we're gonna have an input element. We're gonna have a type attribute of text, again type equal sign double quotes text. We're gonna have an ID attribute equal sign double quotes is gonna be L name, that is gonna be stand for last name. The name again is gonna be equal sign double quotes L name, and a value is gonna be equal sign double quotes, and it's gonna be dough. So here we're gonna have two break lines, and finally we're gonna have an input with type submit. So it's gonna be type equal sign double quotes submit, and a value equal sign double quotes again is gonna be submit. And finally we're gonna end the form tag. So in line 16 we're gonna have a paragraph. If you click the submit button, the form data will be sent to the page called /action_page.php, the one that we have here and the one that we just created here. We don't have anything in the page, but we have the file. So let's save it, and now we can go to our website, and this is how it's gonna look like. So that is that for this example. Again, we're not dealing with servers here, we're not dealing with backends. So here we have the form element. An HTML form element is used to create an HTML form for user input. So here we have angle brackets form, then we're gonna have 4 elements, and then we end the form tag. The form element is a container for different types of input elements such as text fields, checkboxes, radio buttons, submit buttons, etc. All the different form elements are covered in this chapter. Now we're gonna have the input element. An HTML input element is the most used form element. An input element can be displayed in many ways depending on the type attribute. Here are some examples. So we have in the first column we're gonna have the type, and the second column is gonna be its description. So here we have open angle brackets, we're gonna have the input element, the type attribute equal sign double quotes, and we're gonna have text. So text is gonna be the type. The description displays a single line text input field. Now we're gonna have the input element, the type attribute, and this type is gonna be radio. Displays a radio button for selecting one of many choices. We're gonna have input type equal sign double quotes checkbox. Checkbox displays a checkbox for selecting 0 or more of many choices. We're gonna have the input element. We're gonna have the type attribute equal sign double quotes inside. We're gonna have submit. Type submit displays a submit button for submitting the form. And finally we're gonna have the input element, the type attribute equal sign double quotes button displays a clickable button. And you can check out this link if you wanna read more about it. So here we have the text fields. The open angle brackets input element type attribute equal sign inside of the double quotes we have text defines a single line input field for the text input. So here they give us an example, a form with input fields for the text. So we have the form element. Inside of the form element we're gonna have the label element and the input element, another label element and another input element. So and the first label element, here we have the for attribute equal sign double quotes F name, short for first name. We're gonna close the angle brackets. We're gonna type in first name, colon, and then we're gonna end the label tag. We're gonna put a break line, and we're gonna have an input with type text. The ID again is gonna be has to match the for. In this case, it's gonna be fname, short for first name. The name equal sign double quotes fname. We have a break line, and here we're gonna have a label element, and we're gonna have a for attribute of lname that stands for last name colon. We're gonna end the label tag, and we're gonna have a break line. Finally, we're gonna have the input element with a type attribute, and this type attribute is gonna be equal sign double quotes is gonna be text. We're gonna have an ID of lname, then we're gonna have the name attribute equal sign double quotes lname. So if we click try it yourself, this is how it should look like. Is the example that we just saw. So we can grab this whole thing, we can go to Visual Studio Code, and we can just paste it here, save it, and we can go to our website. And this time it doesn't have the submit button, but it's pretty much similar. So we have the label input, we have the for, we have the input element, and this is how it should look like, exactly like this. Note that the form itself is not visible. Also note that the default width of the text input fields is 20 characters. So this is what we have here. We have the form element. Inside of that, we're gonna have a label input, a label element, an input element, another label element, and finally an input element. Inside of the label element, we're gonna have a for attribute. Inside of the input element, we're gonna have the type attribute, we're gonna have the ID, we're gonna have the name, and we're gonna have the value. So that is that. Note, the form itself is not visible. Also note that the default width of an input field is 20 characters. Now we're gonna have the label element. As what you can see here, this is the label element, so we're gonna discuss it right now. The label element. Notice the use of the label element in the example above. The label tag defines a label for many forms elements. The label element is useful for screen reader users because the screen reader will read out loud the label when the user focuses on the input element. The label element also helps users who have difficulty clicking on very small regions such as radio buttons or checkboxes, because when the user clicks the text within the label element, it toggles the radio button / checkbox. The for attribute of the label tag should be equal to the ID attribute of the input element to bind them together. So they're talking about this for attribute. It should be equal to the ID. So in this case, the for attribute equal sign double quotes. Inside of the double quotes, we have the fname, short for first name, and it has to match the ID and the input element. So the ID and the input element is equal sign double quotes fname, short for first name. So that is that. Then we have the radio buttons. So we can close radio buttons. The input type equal sign double quotes radio defines a radio button. Radio buttons let a user select one of a limited number of choices, and here we're gonna click this. We're gonna check this example. Okay, so we're gonna have this example and choose your favorite web language. So we can click here and we can click any of these. So let's grab this code and let's go to Visual Studio Code. Okay, so I'm gonna paste it, and this is what we have here. So we have an H2 radio buttons, we have a paragraph, choose your favorite web language, and now we're gonna have the form element. Inside of the form element, we're gonna have an input, a label, another input, another label, and another input, and finally another label element, as you can see. Okay, the first, we're gonna be in line 10. We have the input element, the type is gonna be radio. So again, you have type equal sign double quotes. Inside the double quotes you have radio. We're gonna have the ID HTML, the name is gonna be fab_language, and the value is gonna be HTML. The label is gonna be the for attribute equal sign. We're gonna have the HTML, we're gonna close it, and then we're gonna have the text HTML. We end the label tag, and we're gonna have a break line here. Okay, So now we're gonna have in line 13, we're gonna have the input element, we're gonna have type, again it's gonna be radio, the ID this time is gonna be CSS, the name is gonna be fab underscore language, and the value is gonna be CSS. So its label element is gonna have a for attribute equal to CSS, and as you can see, the input has an ID of CSS and the label has a for of CSS. In the first example, we have an input ID of HTML, and also the for attribute of the label is going to be HTML. That is that. We close the angle brackets, we have the CSS text, we end the label tag, and we have a break line here. Finally, in line 16, we're going to have an input element, the type is going to be radio, the ID is going to be JavaScript, and this ID that is JavaScript has to match the for attribute of the label. So we're gonna have here in line 16, the name is gonna be fab underscore language, the value is gonna be JavaScript. In line 17, we're gonna have the label input, the for attribute is gonna be JavaScript. The for attribute of the label element is the same as the ID attribute of the input element, as you can see here. So we close the angle brackets, we have the text JavaScript, and we end the label tag. So we save it, we can go to our website, as you can see that here. This is how it looks like. Choose your favorite web language, so you can choose HTML, CSS, JavaScript. That's all of that. Yeah, this is how it should look like. Now we have the checkboxes. The input type checkbox defines a checkbox, and again you have to use angle brackets. The input element, the type attribute, equal sign, double quotes, and inside of the double quotes you have to put the checkbox. Checkboxes let a user select 0 or more options of a limited number of choices. So here they give us this example. We're gonna check out this example. Okay, we're gonna grab this code, and this is how it looks like. This time, in the previous example, we were only to pick one, but this time we can pick the three choices if we would like so, or just one or two, or we don't pick anyone. So we can also submit. Okay, unexpected close. Okay, so I'm gonna grab this code, we're gonna go to Visual Studio Code, I'm gonna delete this, I'm gonna save it, and I'm gonna open it, and this is our website. Let's say I have a bike and I have a car. I don't have a boat, so I submit that, and I have the action underscore page, so that is working, but I don't have a server, so it's not gonna go anywhere. It's just gonna go to this file, this PHP file, but there's nothing in here, so that is that. It's just for general purpose here. But let's go over this code. So again, we have an H2 and we have a paragraph, and we're using the strong element. So as you can see, we have here the strong element, so it looks kind of like a darker. Okay, that is that. But the important thing is the form element. This time has an action attribute. Again, you can read this information if you want. Equal sign, double quotes, / action underscore page .php. So it's gonna go to this file that I have here. And again, we are not dealing with servers here, at least now in this video. So inside of the form element, we're gonna have an input element, and we're gonna have a type attribute, and the type attribute is gonna be checkbox. We're gonna have an ID, and the ID is gonna be vehicle1. We're gonna have a name, the name is gonna be vehicle1, and the value is gonna be bike. And to the next line, we're gonna have a label element. We're gonna have a for attribute, and the for attribute is gonna be vehicle1, so it's gonna match the for attribute is gonna match the ID of the input, as you can see. So we have in line 12, we have the input element, we have the type checkbox, we have the ID vehicle2, the name vehicle2, the value car. Line 13, we have the label element, we have the for attribute vehicle2 is matching the ID of the input element of line 12, and the text is I have a car. So we end the label tag and we put a break line. Finally, we're gonna have an input element. We type checkbox ID vehicle 3, name vehicle 3. The value is gonna be vote. The label this time is gonna be a 4 attribute. It's gonna be a vehicle 3. I have a vote. We end the label tag and we have 2 break lines. And finally, we're gonna have an input with type. This time the type is not gonna be checkbox. The type is gonna be submit, so it's clickable, and the value is gonna be submit. So we save it and we can go to our website, and this is how it looks like. So we can click or unclick if we desire, and then we have here this button, the submit, as you can see here in the code. So that is that. Now we have the submit button. The input type submit defines a button for submitting the form data to our form handler. The form handler is typically a file on the server with a script for processing input data. The form handler is specified in the form's action attribute. So here they're giving us an example, and we already saw this example. Like we have this in the previous video, or in the previous example. Submit your form data, your input was received. Okay, so that is that. We already saw this example, and this is how it should look like. The name attribute for the input. Notice that each input field must have a name attribute to be submitted. If the name attribute is omitted, the value of the input field will not be sent at all. As we can see here, in line 9 we have the name attribute, and line 12 we also have a name attribute, and line 15 we also have a name attribute. So that is important, because the value of the input field will not be sent at all if the name attribute is omitted. So keep that in mind. We can click here and try it yourself, and this is the same example, but it's pretty much the same example, but we are not using the name value, the name attribute here, so it's not gonna work. And again, we're not using a server, but you should always have a name attribute here.